You can do it because the phone is coming on.
She put a pot on she hair and gone. Them a the first one out on the dam. Basket on she head, bucket in each hand. Hold up on she frock, I wanna she grandson. To the market, them a go. For the morning, the day is dawning. For cockcrow to give the villagers a warning. Rise and shine, the birds them a sing. All animal take turn as them join in the waking. Cockcrow, dagaba, donkey, bray, horse, and they even duck a quack. Cockcrow, dagaba, donkey, bray, horse, and they even duck a quack. Come and hear this sweet story that tell the people about life in the country. All day a back down, me now a come home. Inaga, jackass yard for fetch the load. Cockle shy hand, bag over shoulder, running by his side, a Rexy and Rover. From the farm, them a come. Sun a go down but up the river. Some washing clothes, some folks are bathing at the water. Fisherman, they catch them a bring. From a canoe boat, man, them start offloading. Aymara, Kwakwari, Hail Baka Kuma Kuma, even Lokonani. Aymara, Kwakwari, Hail Baka Kuma Kuma, even Bangameri. Listen to this sweet story that tell the people about life in the country. Them children glad when the weekend come. Out in the yard, them all gather round. Some a play catcher, some making house from straw. Two who come later, a grandma or grandpa. All a sit down just a wait. Moonlight so bright, it's just the right time to listen story or to say a little nursery rhyme. Grandpa voice a echo in the night as he tell it tell some picnic a there with fright. Oh Ligan, Mungeza, Massa Kurma Bura Nancy even Watamuma. Oh Ligan, Moongeza, Massa Kurma Bura Nancy even Watamuma. Yeah man, that's the true story that tell the people about life in the country, life in the country.
That little ditty we used to torment our teachers with when we were kids goes something like this. Onward, upward, Mary had a go. Day by day she tied it to a rope, till at length they got past the rope, and Miss Mary had to run behind it. We had a lot of fun with that, but do you actually know how beautiful these words are? Here's the Song of Guyana's Children by W. Hawley Bryant. of the mighty Roraima, land of great rivers and far-stretching sea. So like the mountains, the sea, and the river, great, wide, and deep in our lives would we be. Onward, upward, may we ever go, day by day in strength and beauty.
All right. Good night, family. We're on to the Figueira show. Compliments of the management and staff of Benchcop Radio 107.1 right here in Georgetown. We're streaming live 1 hour. Tonight, you're going to have a packed program for you. We're going to be talking about Because We Care cash grant. We would have seen an influx of ministers here in Region 10. The entire cabinet, I believe, was in Region 10 to share Because We Care grant. But the question is, has it served its true and intended purpose, which is to increase accessibility to our nation's children? Accessibility. When we came to government in 2015, we observed and we discovered that it was a very significant revelation for us. Thousands of Guyanese young people didn't have access to proper education, and because of their location, because of the transportation costs, a lot of the kids, for example, in the hinterland communities, many of them didn't attend in school regularly because of the difficulty in having access to transportation to reach to those locations. But Because We Care is here to remedy that situation. But the question is, will it achieve its true objective and potential? Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, on the show, we are going to be having our guest, Mr. Aubrey Norton, an academic, former lecturer at the University of Guyana, former member of Parliament, Central Executive Committee member of the People's National Congress Reform, and a executive director in the leader of the opposition's office, Mr. Aubrey Norton, who would have had a back and forth in the public's domain with the former Speaker of the House, Mr. Ralph Ramkaran, who misinterpreted Mr. Norton's articulation on this COVID cash grant. Good night, Mr. Norton. Good night, sir. Are you hearing me? Mr. Norton. Unmute your
Me and them at all.
That little ditty we used to torment our teachers with when we were kids goes something like this. Onward, upward, Mary had a go. Day by day she tied it to a rope, till at length they got past the rope, and Miss Mary had to run behind it. We had a lot of fun with that, but do you actually know how beautiful these words are? Here's the Song of Guyana's Children by W.
Yes, Mr. Norton. Good night, sir. So the
Good
problem with the
evening.
internet is reminiscent of Good night, sir. The problem that we were experiencing with the internet is reminiscent of the realities of learning on the virtual platform. And you would have had an opportunity most recently to reiterate the very eloquent points that you would have put out in the public domain to counter a misunderstanding or a misinterpretation of what Mr. Ralph Ramkaran would have said with to your position on the COVID cash grant. So for the public who is viewing, we want you to take the opportunity to reiterate those salient points you would have made so that the Guyanese populace can have a clearer understanding of the coalition's position with respect to the COVID, the cash grant, the Because We Care cash grant. Go ahead, Mr. Norton.
First of all, thanks for having me and a good evening to your viewing public. Now, essentially, what Mr. Ramkaran was doing was responding to a letter I put in the press and put in social media. In that letter, I said a number of things. One of them was that $19,000 is inadequate. And it is
Yes.
inadequate because if one does any analysis of what is required, one will recognize that $19,000 is probably just the tip of the iceberg. But I went on to make other points. One of the other points I made is the failure of the government to deal with the issue in a comprehensive way. Now, you're in COVID 19. Children are kind of restricted in terms of going to school. Some of the exams children are going to school. So
Mm-hmm.
what in essence would have happened is that you have a large number of children who are at home. If they are to access education, then you will need investments in the internet and information technology so that they can have access to the internet and use the platforms to learn. I further made the point that in those areas where the AP and UAFC place internet hubs, many of them, the government, what they are doing is restricting access so that people don't get news outside of what they want them to get. So it's inadequate. I was also making the point that the question of children's access to education, no $19,000 can solve. Because one, you're having increase in poverty, all the prices in the markets, those prices are going up. There are no increases in wages and salaries. So what that means is between 2020 August 2nd and now, the real wage of our people has decreased. And therefore, if one is going to increase access to education, then one needs a comprehensive program that addresses the question of how do you get children in school. Some of them don't have money for transportation. So transportation becomes an issue. Experience has shown that many of them sometimes don't have a meal a day. So the question of hot meals come into play. The point that I make is that there are a lot of elements that contribute to children not being able to access education. And you merely giving a $19,000 cash grant would not address those issues and result in children being in school in larger numbers. And that to me is the crux of the matter. I also pointed out that there seems to be no plan on distribution, there is no proper plan on implementation, and what is worse is that there are no checks and balances, no mechanisms for accountability. And it is on that basis and on the basis of the history. We had the 2005 flood where there was little or no accountability. We just saw in the distribution of the recent COVID 19 relief, we saw a situation where there was discrimination and also corruption. So, one of my arguments is that how it is structured, it is teamed with potential for corruption. And it does appear to me that it is aimed at enriching the PPP elite, their families, and friends, and not necessarily contributing to increase access of our children to education. And so one has to recognize that not because somebody said they are given a cash grant, it means that cash grant is aimed at solving the problems we have. I believe there is need for a comprehensive program that seeks to address the various problems that children, teachers, and parents, who are the key stakeholders, to address the problems they are facing so that those children can access education. The parents can be comfortable, the teachers can be comfortable, and in that kind of environment, it will be conducive to learning, and children will be in a better position to access education. As it stands, it does appear to me to be another slush fund in which there's going to be widespread corruption. I noticed a video today in which people were just flocking together to get the assistance, which also suggests that even in doing it, though it is intended to operate within the context of COVID, there is a violation of the COVID
Yes,
protocols. I mean,
very much.
you only have to listen to what is happening around the country, and you will know this government isn't serious with the protocols. How come a young lady can get shoot
Yes.
how come someone could get shoot that hour in the morning in public if the protocols? And when we listen and get information on what is happening in Region 9, you have a situation where the PPP controlled businesses open and non-PPP persons, they enforce it. So there is
But Aubrey, it's important that the public understands in the context of what you're talking about with the young
recognize
lady who was shot.
that it is clear that is not to deal with COVID and children access to education.
Yeah, I don't want the point to miss where you highlighted a young lady to
I'm not hearing
express
you.
the view. I wanted you to make it clear to the listeners that the young lady that you're referencing to bring home the point of the breach
I'm not
of the
hearing you,
COVID.
Jermaine.
I don't understand. Management, come in. You hear me now? Are you hearing me? I wanted you to bring home the point with respect to the violation of the COVID protocols with the young lady you reference.
Jermaine,
That
are you
young,
hearing me?
yes, I'm hearing you. Can we have the technical team to rectify this
I'm not
problem?
hearing at all.
I don't know what's going on. But I was saying that the young lady is the daughter of the two show of region, one of the two shows for Region 9, and she was shot by the regional executive officer in her stomach. The regional executive officer, a young man, shot this young lady in her abdomen in Region 9, the two show's daughter. And it is alleged that attempts were made to pay off the two show to hush the story. And the people of the two show wasn't having it. He said, let the matter be resolved in the courts. But it is indeed true that if they were observing the COVID protocol, this young lady right here would not have been shot. And the calls from the people of Letem for the for the REO to be relieved of his duty. I hope that the powers that be would recognize the request of the people and honor that. But we're back to the because we care crash grant and people knowledge is power. So we ask you to please share the live so that more persons can view and be a part of this conversation because knowledge is power. It is the only thing that you can give away and still retain. Okay? The COVID cash grant. The because we care cash grant. Linden, Region 10, we would have seen an influx. RB, are you hearing me? We have seen an influx of the entire I would want to say the entire cabinet was up here today. We would have seen the likes of Honorable Gil Teixeira, Bishop Edgil, Yu Todd, Priya Manik Chan herself was up here. Robeson Ben, Nigel Darmlal, the entire cabinet. A matter of fact, Robeson Ben was at my school today and he said, Figueira, if France said, no cabinet, y'all going to share out the money to the people because we care. But the real issue is, Aubrey, and you would have indicated, that is accessibility to education. And one of the issue when we came in was transportation by land and by water posed a serious challenge for the young Guyanese students, especially in the hinterland, to have access to education. Now, because of COVID, the learning experience would have changed and it is now an experience shared on a virtual platform that requires devices, that requires data, of which many students and parents do not have access to. The parents can't afford it and children don't have access to it. Those who have the devices, there's a challenge of data, and those who may have it also, there's no internet available. So the challenge of accessibility still remains. And then you brought to the conversation the issue of accountability and transparency, which still is an issue. But in Linden, we have seen an influx of so many ministers. The speeches they would have made to the people before they collected was so politically toxic that parents were talking about it. That's not what they went there to do. So, I mean, what are your views in that respect? And more so, Aubrey, the teachers being charged with the responsibility to share this cash grant, which is no not their responsibility. I was hoping Miss McDonough would have been on the air to address this from a union's perspective, because some teachers share the view that they're not comfortable with that. Go ahead, Aubrey. So we yes, Aubrey. So we having some technical difficulties. But the issue is because we care, and the question is, does the government really care for our young people who are in the school system? Does $19,000 sufficient to address the issue of accessibility, of providing our young people with an opportunity to be educated in this virtual platform as a result of the COVID-19 situation? Aubrey, are you hearing me? If you're not, I suggest you sign out and sign in back, because we're having some challenges. And parents and students and all those who are on this platform here tonight, this is the reality of what learning on the virtual platform is, and the challenges with data, with the challenges with the internet. This is what the teacher, the student experience is on a consistent basis. So this in itself presents a difficulty for the teacher to transmit the content to the students. Aubrey, are you hearing me? We're
Hello?
having some difficulty. Yes, go ahead.
I didn't hear what you said.
Are you hearing me now?
I didn't hear. Yes, I'm hearing you
But are
now.
you hearing me now? Okay, I was saying,
Yes,
Aubrey,
I am.
I'm saying that you would have made it clear that one of the issue, the fundamental issue with the because we care is its inability to provide proper accessibility to the learner, and more so that we are on a virtual platform. And the very challenges that you and I are experiencing here tonight is testimony to the experience teachers and students are experiencing on this platform. And it creates a challenge in itself to teach on this platform. And it denies a lot of young people who do not have the access to be on this platform of the learning experience. So you are rightfully expressing the view that the $19,000 is grossly inadequate, because you have to purchase data, you have to purchase the device so that the child can learn on this platform. What are your views in this?
Well, I think first of all, what the PPP is seeking to do is to exploit what they perceive as people's desire for cash. And so they say 19,000. And they know people are in need. So
Yeah.
19,000 is offered and people will take it, and I think they should. But it is our task to point out that apart from being a bribe, apart from being involved in bribery for political votes, it cannot address the critical problems that are faced by many parents and children. The bottom problem here is a big man called poverty. For some, 19,000 might be okay because they have resources. But for the large majority of the population that is in poverty, for them to access education, there are need for measures that will alleviate that poverty. And a 19,000 cash grant doesn't alleviate poverty. What it does is allow them to say, we give you some cash, but
Yeah.
is this cash supposed to be contributing to the resolution or the solving of problems? And there is where it runs into problems. Because if you give somebody $19,000 and that person needs, first of all, yeah, like you said, the instrument, be it a cell phone, etc., and they don't have resources to pay for data, then to solve that, you need to create the platform that people can access with fairly high quality. And nothing is being done in this regard. In fact, the government is seeking to dismantle a lot of the achievements that were made under the coalition in terms of creating information technology hubs, internet hubs. a lot is being done to curtail access. And so clearly, what the government is pursuing is a narrow objective. And then what they do when you say it is inadequate, they suggest that you are saying no to cash grants. No one is saying no to cash grants. In fact, one is saying it's inadequate. But even outside of the cash grants, there are a number of policy and other decisions that need to be made that will contribute to parents, children, teachers being able to perform better in the education sector and ensuring that there's not only access to education, but to quality education. And one has to recognize that what the government needs to do is to sit down and study what are the critical issues affecting teachers, parents, and the children. Education is not delivered by parents, though parents
Yes.
contribute. Education is not delivered by children, though children access it. It is delivered by teachers. And if you can't recognize that you have to make teachers competent, this process, you have to do the things that will help teachers to access the platforms. For instance, if a teacher wants to teach by way of the internet, do you think that teacher with the minuscule resources going to take the money and put it, say, to get data to help children? Some will do it, but in the main, many wouldn't. So what the government needs to study is what mechanisms need to be put in place to help teachers to ensure that children can have access. So you deal with it first, you have the level of the teacher. Then you have the level of the parents. You have to analyze what are the issues confronting the parents. High cost of living, high cost of transportation, poor wages and salaries. Some people unemployed in this era of COVID. So to just say 19,000, you imagine a parent gets 19,000 and they have no resources for the children to eat. Do you think that will go directly to education? It wouldn't.
Certainly not. Certainly
It
not.
will go to what it will go to what the parents estimate is to the most immediate interest and need. And so
Yes.
one cannot, it's like the stupidity they did. You said you were going to decrease VAT. And as a result of the decrease in VAT, cost of living will go down. Now, what saying was that it didn't fit reality because they purported to have reduced VAT on a number of things, and virtually everything went up, which means there wasn't a thorough analysis of every level. How the businessman would the businessman pass the tax relief down, or what's another means of accumulating? Then there are a number of other issues that are related that will determine whether a reduction in VAT will actually redound to the benefit of the people. We have seen in the last year that it hasn't. And rather than having the positive impact of, of reduced cost of living, every single thing went up. And so you give yourself a double whammy. On the one hand, you reduce the income due to taxes. And on the other hand, the people that the relief was intended for, they don't get the relief. So, what is the purpose of the policy? What is the purpose of the decision? Oh, we satisfy some election promise. But the election promise was not based on proper analysis. The election promise was a function of the silly period where when people are campaigning, they just call figures and say, we can do this, we can do that. And even the government was saying 50,000. I don't know how they end up
Yes,
at
you are.
19. So by their
Yes,
own
yeah.
election promise, huh? By their own
Yes, I
election
agree.
promise, they are acknowledging that is inadequate. Because when they did analysis, I assume they did it, they concluded that they can give 50,000. But when you come now to implement, you're giving 19,000. That sounds to me like a Chinese picture without director. Everybody kicking, butting, biting, going in their own direction. And
All
cannot
right.
solve the problems that we have to solve. No way
All
are
right.
we going to deal with
Yes.
these issues adequately.
Okay, good night,
Thank
Miss
you.
Coretta McDonald. Thank you, Arby, for that very erudite presentation you just made there. Let me take this opportunity to welcome our MP, Miss Coretta McDonald, who's in the capacity here tonight as the General Secretary of the Guyana Teachers Union. I know you and the Minister of Education has had a lot of public wars because you are adamant in your defense for your teachers. And Coretta, I mean, Arby and I started the conversation on this COVID, on this cash grant because we care. And we basically hit home the point that one, the cash grant is grossly inadequate, and two, it does not essentially serves the purpose of increasing accessibility to education. But you have a number of issues, and more so the fact that this cash grant, one, is taxpayers' money, and it is for the Guyanese children. Many of them, especially those who are in the private schools, Aubrey and Coretta, many of those students who are in the private schools are not having access to this cash grant. So the question is, what about those children and the opportunities to have access to education? Because the private schools are also using the public schools, the government's curriculum. So why is it that the nation's children who are in the private institutions aren't benefiting from these this cash grant that their parents are contributing to? They pay taxes as well. And we don't want people to go away with the impression because the child is attending private school that the parent is well off. Many of these parents make grave sacrifices. So
Yeah.
they too should benefit because it is a because we care. So what about the caring for the students in the private schools too? And Aubrey, I must agree with you. This cash grant has, I mean, many people say it listed it is to boost the private sector because today the supermarkets in Linden had a lot of people in there. So it begs the question, what really was the purpose of this? I dropped a parent down after she went to Christian Work Secondary and she said, Figueira, I'm happy for this grant. I said, I'm happy that you get it too. But she said, sir, I ain't gonna use this money to go and buy no book or school clothes. My children gotta eat. And this is why I'm gonna take this money for to buy some food because I do home all the time. Then going to school and they eating out everything in the house. So does it serve the purpose that it was intended for? Go ahead, Aubrey. Correct us. Experience what a lot of teachers and students have been experiencing on this platform with the bad internet, poor access. Oh, corrector. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Corrector.
Hi, Jermaine. Good night, and good night to your viewers. Good night, Comrade Norton, and thanks for having me on your program. Jermaine, I just want to correct this. I'm not having a war with the Minister of Education. The minister is having a war with Coretta MacDonald because she
That's the
sees
perception of
Coretta MacDonald as the GTU. She doesn't see Coretta MacDonald as the elected, and not the installed or the selected, but the elected General Secretary of the
Is
Guyana
correct
Teachers Union.
on?
She doesn't
Yes,
see me
yes.
that way. And so I want to say that
I'm not hearing anything.
for those who know Coretta MacDonald, you would know that Coretta MacDonald has always been championing the cause for teachers. But it's strange now that because Coretta MacDonald is again agitating for the rights of teachers, Priya Manik Chand and her cronies, they're seeing Coretta MacDonald as a political tool. As a matter of fact, Priya went so far to say that Coretta MacDonald is an APNU stooge. Well, I am proud. I don't have a difficulty with being an APNU stooge because you know what? In the coalition, we have respect for women. In the coalition, we see Guyanese. We don't see race. In the coalition, we give to our citizens equally across the board. So I am proud to be APNU, AFC, activist, whatever name she wants to call me in relation to the coalition. I'm proud to be a part of that organization. But let me say to you, this whole issue with the cash grant, because I think that's what you're asking me to talk about. This
Yes.
whole issue with the cash grant. First of all, it's the PPP's way of trying to win back the hearts of the citizens of this country, because they know to themselves that they've treated citizens across this country very badly. First, by dismissing so many hundreds and thousands of citizens innocently, from super cleaner to those who possess a PhD. And so this is their attempt, because you know it's coming up to their 1 year installation anniversary. So they want to try to show that they care, which in fact we know and everybody else know that they don't care. If they had cared for the nation and for the people of this country, let me say that, they would not have had persons lining up in huge lines when we got COVID to collect $19,000. If they really cared for the nation, and since it's a school grant, then they would have gone out there to ensure that they purchase tablets and load them fully to give to the students. You know, like you just said, parents now are in crisis, families are in crisis because mothers have been dismissed, fathers have been dismissed, and you think parents, lots of the ordinary parents, ordinary poor parents, they got the time now to look for tablet and school shirt and pencil and bag. They do the things that are most necessary at this time, and that's getting food for their children. But the PPP, they got caught, and because they're not thinking strategically, and the fact that they have not consulted, and this is what they wanted to do as a political gimmick, to show up, to make a big show out of nothing, they decided to give this cash grant. Outside of the political show, it's one of the ways where they can cipher off monies.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping that just the same way they would have left out the private schools, which I'll come to just now, that they are going to include all of those students who have dropped out of school. I'm hoping that they're going out there to look for them so that they can receive their $19,000. But when we come to the private schools, because we care, if you care, then there should not be any form of discrimination. And that right there is a form of discrimination. Those children are children of this nation. They are going to make up the cadre of future leaders for this country. So if you care, how you're leaving them out? Their parents pay taxes to this nation. So why are you leaving them out? And you see, this is what I'm saying. It was an ill-thought initiative. And we know the PPP. They don't think anything through. They just operate. Somebody wake up one morning or in a meeting, they dream something and they just decide that we're going to implement this. Again, this is how they operate. Wild, no sense of direction whatsoever. And if you look at the manner with which they're operating, this is a school's grant, cash grant, whatever you want to call it. Mind you, we are not against this. The GTU is not against this. What the GTU has got objections with is the fact that teachers are being bullied to distribute monies. That's what we have a difficulty with. Because here again, the Ministry of Education / the government, they're going against a circular that the ministry would have issued on not under the coalition, under the PPP many, many years ago, which says teachers are prohibited from handling cash. Any dealing with cash should be that of the PTA, not teachers. And so teachers were prevented from holding fundraising activities in school. So how is it now you're asking teachers to go to share $19,000? I just left a GTU and U forum where we have over 650 or 700 teachers in that on that platform. And teachers are complaining that they are being instructed to go out there and distribute, to be in school to distribute monies. Now, a couple of things there. Nobody is thinking about the safety of those teachers, because you know what? I'm almost certain that every parent would not be able to come today or tomorrow or the next day, which means that those monies have got to be stored somewhere. And the common man would think that, you know what? Jermaine Figueira is the head teacher for this school. He might be the one collecting the money. He might be the one storing the money for the next day. And the next thing you know, your life is at risk. Your safety is being compromised because people are thinking that Jermaine got a whole lot of monies. And those are the things that we said to our teachers. We issued an advisory to safeguard our teachers. That advisory, let me say to you, like, remember I said earlier, Priya sees and our crony sees corrector as the GTU. So when that advisory was issued to our teachers by the president of the GTU, I'm the general secretary. The person who got the cuss out was Coretta McDonald. Priya went on Facebook and she cussed out Coretta McDonald. And all of this, you know, when we look at all their ranting and raving of Priya Manik-Chan as the minister, the installed minister of education, I'm sure not very long from now we'll have to move a motion of no confidence against her, because she is incompetent. She doesn't understand how to manage education. And so as soon as any form of criticism you put there against Priya, she's ready to cuss you out, just the same way she did to the US ambassador, if we remember that. And that's the kind of people that we have to deal with. Those are the kinds of people that we have there who our children have to look up to take pattern from them. I don't want any of my sons to look at any one of them and to take pattern after them. But this is what is happening. This is what is happening with the cash grant. We feel good that parents can get a little small piece. That's what I call it, a little small piece. A teacher from Trinidad on our program just now said he pities the teachers in Guyana because the teachers in Trinidad are receiving 3.5 times, and that's at the lowest level, 3.5 times what the teachers in Guyana are receiving as salary. A teacher from Trinidad on our program just said that. And so I'm saying, since you wanted to give the teachers the parents a little small piece, you should give the parents a little small piece, and don't run around schools to say, oh, it's a school's cash grant. And a school's cash grant means you're talking about school materials. That's what school's cash grant means. But you know what, Jermaine, just before you go there, you know what the minister would have said? Priya Manik-Chan said, well, if the parents want to buy a water tank, or they want to buy a bucket, or they want to buy water, the children will still benefit. The children will benefit from it. That's her level of thinking. And that's who we have to deal with. But you were going to say something, Jermaine.
Yes. Very interesting. Very interesting. But listen, Loretta and Aubrey. Aubrey, are you hearing me? Aubrey? Yes, Coretta, I figure you're hearing me. Now, the Minister of Education and several of the ministers who We're in Linden today. We're saying to the teachers that they have to take their vaccines because school will be open in September. And some of the teachers said, we are least concerned about us. We are more concerned about the safety of our students.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
where is the vaccination program and the safety protocols to protect our nation's children? One of the ministers said, we are more concerned right now with the teachers because the young people are resilient. They could withstand this virus. And one of the teachers said, as recent as this week, a 16-year-old died. So, how are you planning to reopen school in a COVID environment, giving the teachers and the students um, further risk to contracting COVID? Wouldn't it be prudent, because we care, to provide all the teachers and students with devices and readily access to internet so that the virtual platform could be the means of protecting not only the teachers but more so the students? And they switch the topic. So what is the union's position, the reopening of school? But before I allow you to answer that, I would like to hear Aubrey's view in light of the government's posture in. Oh, go ahead, Coretta. Aubrey's off. Go ahead.
Um, Jermaine, you went too far and that teacher went too far. Maybe she doesn't have the information. But we had an 11-year-old that died from COVID. An
Yes.
11-year-old. We
Mhm.
had a 17-year-old and then just recently a 16-year-old. And we have right now at the COVID hospital in ICU 8-year-olds and 7-year-olds. Now
Yes.
you are insisting and you want to make it mandatory that teachers must have vaccines before they enter the schools. But like you said, what about the children? What plans do they have in place to deal with one, transportation to get the children to and from school? Huh? Is there any
Yes.
plan? Zero. What you're talking about reopening schools. Have you already sorted out how many additional buildings you're going to need to make annexes or to be used as annexes for schools? Because we're talking here COVID and we're talking 6 feet apart. And if we're talking about, let's say, Mackenzie Primary with a population of 500, you might very well have 5 grade ones with 25 in the class. 9 can fit in a class. We're talking 2 and something class. So 3 classrooms. You start talking about more teachers yet? You start talking about more cleaners yet? Now, these are the things that we have to start looking at, as well as the increases in COVID deaths and COVID cases, before you even start babbling like parrots or repeating like parrots. Schools will reopen in September. Schools will reopen in September. Schools will reopen in September. And you know, the sad thing about it is that these are the people who are saying, because we care, because we care. And you have no plan for people's children, no plan for the teachers with regards to their safety or their health. No plans whatsoever, but you're talking reopening of schools. And I'm not surprised that when teachers would have posted those questions to them, they changed the topic. That's how they behave, because they just don't know better. But the GTU, we have already said in no uncertain terms that one, schools cannot be reopened full scale. 2, we would not be able to reopen schools for the nurseries and the grades 1. Because Jermaine and Aubrey and our viewers, you as an adult, you find it difficult to keep that mask on. How much more difficult and uncomfortable wouldn't it be for those children who are 3, 6? And I saw something floating around the place that's talking about we're admitting children now in nursery schools at 2-7. I don't know why Priya thinks she wanted to make schools a daycare center. Let me say to our viewers, when the age of nursery school was moved from 3-9 to 3-6, Priya did that to accommodate her child. And so maybe she has a relative now that she wants to accommodate, so she's dropping the age of the nursery school to 2-7. Now, 2-7 is a baby. Which teacher,
Yes.
how would a teacher be able to manage 15 babies? Huh? And this is because we care, right? All of this is because we care. They have absolutely no vision with regards to the management of this country. We have seen them mismanaged before, and they're doing it even worse at this time. It's happening. But the GTU's position is, like I said, no full scale reopening of schools. 2, even if we reopen schools, the conditions have got to be met. And some of those conditions would be, 1, enough classrooms to accommodate whether we're going to have the grades 10 and 11 and grades 5 and 6. We have to ensure that we have enough space for them. The 9 feet apart, 6 feet apart. We must ensure that we have enough cleaners and that those classrooms are going to be sanitized every half an hour to 45 minutes. Those classrooms are going to be sanitized. Thirdly, we have to ensure that the materials that are needed for the sanitizing of classrooms, mask, and everything else, sick bay and everything else, those have got to be in place. And we are going to ensure that we do what we did when the coalition was in power. The GTU and the Ministry of Education's officials then, we went to schools, our representatives went to schools across this country to look at classrooms, to do the measurement, to ensure we know how many students or pupils can be in a classroom. And then we put there, we had a fact sheet where we ticked off what was adequate, what was not adequate, how many more were needed. Those are the steps that the GTU will continue to take. And now, since we have these numbers skyrocketing, we have to be even more stringent with what we are going to be doing when we go out to do those walkabouts in the schools, to have our fact sheet ticked off and be ready for whatever reopening. I'm not saying September 6th or September, whenever school is going to be ready to reopen. And those are just a few of what GTU has already laid out.
Yes, definitely correct. A lot of the teachers are very much concerned about those comments being made by the Minister of Education concerning the reopening of school, because they understand the multiplicity of challenges this virtual platform has provided. I mean, teachers who have committed to teach on this virtual platform found great difficulty in having their
Yes.
students to access the platform, and they understand that they cannot. And some of those who are using the workbook that is riddled with a much grammatical error, I must say, poses some additional challenges for the teachers.
And those that we did not have in the last term, even though huge sums of monies were budgeted, we did not have the worksheets or the workbooks.
Yeah, and parents are charged with the responsibility of photocopying those workbooks. I mean, it's
Because we
already
care.
a situation where cost of living is very much high, and you are saddling parents with such an additional burden so that their child can have access to an education by photocopying these workbooks that the ministry should provide. Now, correctly, the
And
Ministry of Education has the largest chunk of the budget.
yes.
I don't know if because they are soon going into another budget cycle and the Ministry of Education has not spent more than 50% of its budgetary allocation, is the reason for this cash grant to be distributed when school closed. I mean,
But
one would have thought, corrector, that if you want to give the parents some form of assistance, you would have given them it closer to the so if there was the desire to open school in September, closer to the month of September. What do you think?
But but and German, this is the very thing that I've been saying. And
Hmm?
I noticed
Go ahead.
the vice president, he took my message and he twisted it and said, oh, Coretta said it's a waste of time. But he didn't say exactly what I said. Yes, it's a waste of time to give the people the monies now. If you want to call it school grants, it's a waste of time to give it to parents now, because parents would use the monies to do the things that are important. I'm not going to have $19,000 in my hands and my children are hungry. I'm going to put food on the table. And I am not going to buy a school shirt now or a school pants now, and then come September it can't fit my child or my son or my daughter. It doesn't make sense. The other
Yeah.
thing is, German, this whole school cash grant, and like you said, maybe because they recognize, since schools were not in session and they couldn't buy all of these field materials that are usually bought, and we couldn't have the breakfast programs and so on. I'm hoping that that will be continued, that they want to spend these monies out willy-nilly. But you know what is disgusting is that while you're seeking to spend the monies, the practitioners are left out of it. Where are the practitioners? How are they benefiting from this? They're not benefiting in this way. And the practitioners that I'm talking about here, and are the teachers. You know that teachers have struggled during this pandemic. Their phones have crashed. Their laptops have crashed. They had to increase their internet speed. They had to buy this. They had to buy all sorts of things they had to do to ensure that they engage their learners. But yet, no recognition is being made or given to these practitioners. I've not heard the minister say at any time, look, we're going out there and we're going to offer teachers A, B, and or C. And you know what? When we met with the minister on the first occasion, when she assumed office, one of the first proposals that GTU made was, since we're in a pandemic and teachers are going to be having to engage in teaching virtually, could we, one, engage the two telephone giants, Digicel and the GTT, talk with them to see if they can come up with a package for teachers and maybe something for parents. But we were focusing on teachers, a package for teachers. Secondly, we asked them to let's seek out ways of being able to purchase laptops, maybe phones, depending on how you could afford, and give to teachers to assist them in the delivery of their lessons. Those two were ignored because, again, it's coming from GTU and Coretta is there, so those were ignored. But we are demanding from teachers a whole host of records, and we want these to be sent electronically. Who paying the teachers' light bill? Who paying the teacher's telephone bill? Who paying for the extra data that the teachers got to pay for? Who paying the extra monies to up the teachers in the internet speed that the teacher got to use to do all of these things? Nobody. But yet we're demanding that teachers must be in school and teachers must be in school and teachers must do this and teachers must do that. And all of this is totaling up to show how incompetent the PPP, the ministers are, or the government is, and how they don't care. They just don't care. This
Yes,
whole thing
yes.
about because we care is a whole farce and a pretense.
I'm reading the comments and I'm noticing a one from Miss Candace Narain. She's saying that the Ministry of Education and the Guyana Teachers Union need to work together for the benefit of the students. I want to agree with her. The ministry need to engage the Guyana Teachers Union. Aubrey, we're speaking about the ministry's proposal to reopen school in the month of September in this COVID environment and all of the challenges. What are your views in light of this proposal by the Ministry of Education?
Which proposal? I wasn't hearing you all the time. Which proposal?
The Minister of Education has the desire. She has the desire for schools to be reopened in the month of September. The union has a very different perspective altogether. But what are your views with regards to the government's intention, more so the Minister of Education, for school to be reopened in the month of September?
Well, first of all, the question of whether should open should be dependent on a number of things. First, and not necessarily in this order, is the physical infrastructure in order? In COVID, it is very dangerous, in my opinion, to put children in school without proper running water, because you're demanding that they wash their hands regularly based on COVID practices. So at minimum, they have to have water flowing through the taps at minimum during school hours. I would have done an assessment across the country to see if that is happening in the schools. Secondly, have they budgeted to give the resources for sanitizing, etc., in the school? In other words, are teachers going to go there and they have to find their own sanitizer? Have they have they put in place mechanisms for at every school to determine whether a child or teacher gets COVID? Or you gotta wait till they get it and then go and find out. In other words, you have to be preventative in nature. You will have to have mechanisms to be able to, first of all, protect children and teachers against COVID. And you will also need mechanisms to, to check and to ensure that everything is all in order. I don't know that they would have put that in place. Then, how are you going to do physical distancing in the present environment? Or are you saying we're going to put back the children in a bench, two of them under the 6 feet, and teach them? If you were saying that, it means you're going to be violating your own protocols. In other words, is there the physical capacity, building, furniture, etc., for there to be physical teaching in the pandemic? Then you also have to ask the question, if there isn't this capacity, how are we going to do it? Are we going to move to a shift system in which some children go to school in the morning and some go in the afternoon so you can get more physical space? Questions like that I would ask the minister. And then, what happens if teachers get COVID? What mechanism will we put in place to replace those teachers? Or do we insist, like we're doing in some ministries, for people to continue even if they got COVID? Now, there are a lot of critical issues that demand brain power, that demand that we think them through. I have just dealt there with the physical infrastructure. We ain't talk yet about the socio-psychological aspects of it, and if they're going to have in school people trained to deal with the new problems that will emerge as a result of COVID. And so one has to look at it and do various levels of analysis. Is the social environment right? Is the physical infrastructure okay, including sanitation? Do we have already planned for medical assistance and to people to help prevent, or in the case if people get, to deal with it? Now, do we have a policy on vaccination of children? And do we have vaccines that are appropriate for children to use? There are a plethora of questions that any thinking group will seek to address before start talking about going back to school. Now, I want our children to learn, but dead people don't learn. I want our teachers to teach, but their teachers can't teach. And the cavalier approach of this government to COVID is one that does not augur well for children going back to school without a proper plan, without addressing the critical issues that will affect children? Or are you going to determine that some children go to school, or children who have access to internet, or communities with access to internet, they will use them? All of these things have got to be determined. A lot of the schools are not built to deal with COVID. Many of them are not classroom divided into classrooms. We still have schools that are wide open. The last time I visited a school in Pleasance, it was wide open and a blackboard separating two classes. Is that environment conducive to reopening school amidst COVID? Or is the government saying, we want you to take COVID serious, take vaccine, but when it comes to dealing with the children's education, you don't got to take them serious. Just dump them back in the classroom, in the clusters, and like a long time when you're learning for flick, you hope you land on your foot, and then you end up in your head. Unless it's that the government wants. I know in these matters, you teach people to flick so that they can land on the foot rather than throwing them in there and say flick. And you're there praying that they can land on the foot and they land on their head. So I do not believe, or I have not heard the Minister of Education articulate clear positions as to how schools will reopen. Just saying school can reopen in September, in my opinion, is not the best approach. You have to come with well worked out policies and plans that these must give guarantees that our children will be taken care of. They will go and learn, but they wouldn't move from a classroom to a casket. Now, let's assume children get COVID and have to be hospitalized. Do we have the requisite treatment for them? Or the same treatment we give a lot of them that died at Ocean Views? What do we do? These are issues. When you listen to the Minister of Health, you do not get the impression that they know what they want to do. The only thing they seem bent on is ensuring they have the power to say you must do it. They're interested in the plans and policies that facilitate it in a way that children will learn, teachers will be protected, parents will not be at home and uncomfortable, and we get an education going. So my position will be to urge the minister to come forward with clear proposal to address the myriad of issues that will emerge when you open school. And then when you open schools, are you
You have
going
to
to
keep.
treat boarding schools the same way that you treat children who are going home? And what mechanisms you have to protect children, to deal with children who might observe the protocols at school, but when they meet in the community, it's a totally different environment and new challenges. There are a lot of issues to be addressed here if the intention is to deal with it in a comprehensive way. The People's Progressive Party has shown historically that they are never interested in programs and policies that deal with things in a comprehensive way. They are always about making money, corruption, and once they achieve those narrow objectives, I remember one leader in the PPP said, people can do it anyhow. I mean, if you take that approach, then it will not be in your psyche to want to put in place measures to reopen schools and achieve our objectives. I believe we have to
Yeah.
take another position. There, in my opinion, there is need for more professional people to deal with these issues rather than these runaround politicians. One of the weaknesses of politicians is the tendency not to accept that they can be a know-it-all, that they can give general policy guidance, but it has to be based on some empirical information and evidence from professionals. And so I would think that is the way to go rather than this approach in which it's just an opening school. Let a flick. If the land on the head, the neck broke. If they're lucky and the land on the foot, then they're all right. I have a problem with the flick and hope theory. And a lot of what I hear coming out of the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Health is let a flick, and we can hope that while they're flicking, the land on the foot, so they block their neck.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that perspective there, Aubrey. Please share the live guests. You are on 107.1 FM. This is the Figueira Show, compliments of the Bench Cup family, the Bench Cup Radio 107.1. Please share the live. Knowledge is power. This is a very informative conversation about the Because We Care cash grant, and we are having an intellectual conversation on many issues of importance to the education profession, for our teachers, for our parents, and students. So please share the live. The more people are informed, the better decisions can be made. Correcto. Mr.
I
Norton
do.
would have given a very overarching perspective that I know some of those very sad things you would have articulated from the Guyana Teachers Union standpoint. And we are of the view, as you would have articulated, that the reopening of school has to factor in many varying views and perspectives before the consideration of school be open. And Aubrey has really opened up the conversation to that point where more serious look into this position of reopening school must be taken into consideration. Where's the Ministry of Education position with respect to students who do not possess um, the, the health, they have medical health related issues that they cannot take the vaccine? Are those kids going to be disenfranchised? What is the ministry's position providing kits? They would have tried to provide COVID kits, and we would have seen the discrimination in some of the products being provided to different schools across the region. 10 masks and a sanitizer, while some other schools are getting shield and a whole lot of things. But none, we have to focus on the even the ministries of health recommendation for the vitamins that are recommended, the vitamin C, the zinc, the vitamin D3, um, A, and so forth. Why hasn't the ministry provided these immune building vitamins for the nation's kids? They haven't. Not to say that they don't have the money, they have it, but are they spending it to the benefit of the nation's children? $19,000 will not address easy access to education. Correct. In light of all Ms. Norton has said, and you as the General Secretary, where do we go from here? How do we move forward as a nation?
Well, Jermaine, the GTU as the representative body that represents teachers, we have always, it's not a case that we are working with Priya now. We have worked with her before, and she knows that the GTU is always ready and willing when it comes to the business of education and the welfare of our teachers. And so we have no bars to hold anything back. If the ministry is prepared to sit with us and to get to sit as professionals, first of all, and to talk seriously, we are ready to do that. As a matter of fact, I did indicate before that the GTU would have used its officials all across this country to go out there from school to school in every region, because
Coretta,
we have reps in every region. But if they're
Coretta,
not willing to do that, because let me finish, Jermaine. I heard the Minister of Education saying on Friday, if the GTU wants this to be done and that to be done, and that is what Coretta wants, let her go to Congress Place and tell them to do that, or let her get elected. You see that kind of response? And so this is why I'm saying, if the ministry is ready to sit as a professional group for us to talk seriously the business of education with regards to reopening schools and having safety measures in place for our teachers and our learners, and by extension, the safety of this nation, we are ready and willing to talk. Like I just listed a whole gamut there, and there are so many more that Aubrey would have widened the conversation with. If they're ready tomorrow, we are ready to talk with them. But the thing is, our politicians, in many instances, they can't separate the politics from professionalism. And that's the problem we're having in the Ministry of Education. But again, let me say the GTU is ready and willing. We have written the Ministry of Education on several instances, not a response. But I find it strange, and let me just put this piece in. I find it strange that when the GTU's General Council meeting would have issued a call on Tuesday to stop the agenda, a motion was moved to suspend the agenda, and let's go on the street in front of the ministry to indicate to the ministry and to highlight to them a 27-point document that these are all of our concerns that have not been met since you came into office. The minister found the time that she couldn't find to have a meeting with GTU. She found the time to have a press conference. And that's the level of thinking. And maybe that's because we care.
Okay, let me take this opportunity to Coretta to inform the Straight Up family that my brother Mark Benchcup has given up his time, because he said this information that is coming out of this program is very much timely, and he wants me to extend apologies to the Straight Up family for not showing his good looking face tonight to them. But Mark, you're replaced tonight by a good panel that we have here, and we're going to continue the conversation. Please do share the live. You are on 107.1 FM, Bench Cup Radio. Straight Up tonight is the conversation with former Member of Parliament, General Secretary of the PNCR, Mr. Aubrey Norton, and Member of Parliament, Ms. Coretta McDonald, and General Secretary of the Guyana Teachers Union. Please share the live. Knowledge is power. But Coretta, I must say, the Minister of Education said that the union, the Guyana Teachers Union, has become politicized, and she apparently has difficulty in having that professional dialogue with the union going forward. So, how do you respond to the minister's expressed opinion about the union being politicized?
Just to say that the minister has very short, convenient memory. Because you know what? In 2018, the GTU took industrial action, and you would remember that, 9 days against the coalition. And Priya Manikchand was jumping up. She was happy about it. The union was not political then. But it's strange now that the tables would have turned, and she finds the union as being political. It is even strange that we've had over the years Kumal Chand, who served as president of GAU, president of FITUG, and as a member of parliament for the PPP while they were in government and while they were in opposition. Nobody saw him and his union as being political, even when they took action against the coalition and when they took action against the PPP, when they had industrial action. Nobody saw them as being political. Just when the coalition were in government, they took action again. Nobody saw them as being political. Just recently, we saw the sugar workers coming out again. We saw NASI coming out again, but they weren't deemed political. But the GTU is now being deemed a political entity, and the minister would have difficulty dealing with us. Well, all I would say to the minister is, if she had taken time off to look at the placards that we had there on that picketing exercise, that would have informed her that the GTU is a professional organization. We don't talk politics when we talk in our professional committee meetings. We deal with schools, readiness of schools, our pupils, students, whether they are ready for schools, what we are going to do for them. We deal with our teachers, the kinds of programs we want our teachers to get involved in, their upgrading, promotion of teachers, and other benefits for teachers. You might be able to pick out from that short list that I would have given you if you recognize anything political in that. And so the minister just wants to make a big bluff, a fluff out of nothing. As a matter of fact, the minister is just bent, like I said. She is just bent on being difficult because she recognizes, or let me put it this way, Corrector MacDonald is the Minister of Education's problem. GTU is not the problem. Corrector MacDonald is her problem. She is scared of Corrector MacDonald. Very scared of Corrector MacDonald because they know the kind of influence I have, you know? And so rather than dealing with, and like I said earlier, my president posted an advisory out there and Corrector MacDonald got blows for it. They cost him from prayer for it, you know? So I'm saying the minister's got to grow up, be a mature adult so that she can deal with issues. As a matter of fact, the minister is only the political head of the ministry. The CEO is the person who is the administrative head of the Ministry of Education, and he's the person who deals with policy. So I don't understand. I don't know whether the CEO, Dr. Marcel Hudson, would have made a complaint to the minister that whenever we have a meeting, Correct is obstructing the meeting by throwing political sentences or anything political in the meeting. And maybe that's why she's making that statement. But I've not heard that those kinds of complaints coming. So for the minister to say that GTU is a political organization, I would want her to prove that. Show us the evidence that is saying to her that GTU is a political organization. And if she can't produce that, then just get quiet and let's get on with the business of education.
I'm looking through the chat here, Coretta, and some of the comments are, you know, some teachers are saying, yes, Kamal Chan would have called out the sugar workers as a union leader, and more so, they're saying that the fact that the ministry would have gotten the largest chunk of the budget and the promise 2 budgets later for an increase for public servants, no increase was given to teachers. Why hasn't the union, since Priya is in a we care mode, why hasn't she shown that she has a caring heart for the teachers and increase their salaries? What is the union doing in respect of calling out the minister for teachers to have their increase in salaries 2 budgets later?
Jermaine, that's exactly what the union did on Tuesday, because
Yes.
we were tired of hearing the information is with the Ministry of Finance. The information is with the Ministry of Finance. The information is with the Ministry of Finance. As a matter of fact, the last time we spoke with the Minister of Education and we got that response, we said to her, we are no longer going to be accepting that because you, as the Minister of Education, your colleague is the Minister of Finance. And if you want to push for your sector, you can very well do that. But the minister, again, our teachers are being punished because their general secretary is a member of parliament for the coalition. Our teachers are being punished, which is being very, very, very unprofessional and childlike. I want to further say to you that the issues the GTU is now agitating are issues of salary increases and other benefits that were owed to us last year. Further, we have an agreement with the government of Guyana. And I heard the minister saying 2019, whatever payments for 2019, that's not her responsibility. Whoever was there, they should have done that. And I had to remind the minister before when she made that very comment at a meeting. I had to remind her when she said, she inherited something. I had to remind her that when the coalition got into office in 2015, the coalition inherited a housing revolving project that they could never have gotten started. And that agreement was signed since 2007. The coalition inherited that, and the coalition had in place a unit that was supposed to start under the PS Welch, a unit that was supposed to start looking, a separate unit that was going to start looking at the housing revolving project. We have over, I think it's about 300 and something million dollars or more in a bank account that is between the GTU and the Ministry of Education, with monies just sitting there. And the coalition inherited that from them, and they were about to start looking at that process. The coalition inherited a whole lot of teachers who could not get their duty-free concessions, all because the PS there, the late Polander Kandai, when we submitted those lists to him, when he looked through those lists, he made the comment one day that he only seen, and these are his exact words. Well, me only see a couple of name people name on this list say what me. And those lists never went through. And so when the coalition came into office, we had to battle with the coalition outside of the 100 that we were getting. We had to battle with the coalition. And Minister of State then, Mr. Joseph Harmon, he was the person who granted us an amnesty for 300 duty-free concessions for teachers who were eligible since 2009. 2009, those head teachers retired and couldn't get their duty-free concessions because they were Afro-Guyanese teachers. And so it's not an easy task when we have to sit there to negotiate with the PPP and the manner with which they deal with things. And so I'm saying all of this to say, when the minister now talking about that's not her responsibility, you are the government of the day. And so whatever is signed in the agreement with the government of Guyana, you now form the government of Guyana, you have to fix it now. And so these are some of the issues. We would have had some issues that were not covered in 2019 that rolled over into 2020. And we had nothing in 2020, like you know, and then 2021 is here now, and we have nothing in 2021 after 2 budgets. And so these are the issues that we will continue to agitate. And if after going out there with 20 of our general council members were out there because we had to observe the COVID protocols, and so the others were participating virtually. Only some of our members from the county of Demerara were there in person. And so if after going out there with 20 persons to agitate, the ministry doesn't feel that it's necessary to talk to us, then we are going to have to speak to our members, and we're going to have to take it to the next level.
All right. Okay, family, we are on 107.1 FM Bench Cup Radio. You are having a conversation with us on the Figueira Show. Our guest tonight is former General Secretary Mr. Aubrey Norton of the PNCR, Coretta McDonald MP. Mr. Norton, you was former General Secretary of the PNCR and a leader in the PNC, would have engaged in many protest action, and I'm bringing this question to you based on the comments I'm seeing. Many of the comments are asking for protests. Now, as the leader in the PNCR, you would have collaborated with many union leaders and workers' union to engage in strike actions against this government. What are your views with respect to the call by so many persons on this chat, especially teachers, asking for protest actions? And even on the political realm, some have been asking for protest actions in light of COVID and all that. How would you respond to the guests who are making these comments on Facebook presently?
One of the tasks of an opposition is to keep the government in check, to put checks and balances on them, and to ensure that there is some amount of transparency and respect for the rule of law. When you're dealing with a regime like the People's Progressive Party that lack the ability to discuss, compromise, and find consensus, political struggle becomes almost inevitable. Now, trade unions over the years have struggled for workers. You could recall that the PPP used to give 5% and below arbitrarily throughout its term. The one time that it went above 5 is when they put in place the Armstrong tribunal and it was given. And even that they didn't want to give. Now, political struggle is a necessity when regimes are authoritarian and dictatorial. And this one is. So I believe that one has to put mechanisms in place to ensure that the regime is protested so that it can be kept in check. Now, all and sundry know that there are a lot of times a thin line between what is political and what is industrial. And because of that thin line, a lot of times they overlap. And I can give you endless cases where GAU, under the guise of industrial action, took political action and many times openly supported the People's Progressive Party. Now, trade unions have their interests. Today, their interests might coincide with ex-political party, and therefore they will cooperate to achieve their objectives. Tomorrow, it might not, and there's another ally. But the reality is, political power determines who gets what, when, and how. And it is only political action that will determine that the interest you are pursuing will get what they want. So I am an outright supporter of political action. And I believe each and every political party has the right to mobilize whichever trade union it feels it has a common interest with and to work with them. The PPP spent a lot of time and money bribing people and doing things to ensure they control trade unions so that their political agenda can go forward. Why then shouldn't other political parties do it? And so I believe it should be done. But there's a deeper problem. I saw on Facebook, and I'm not saying Minister Manichan put it, but I'm saying I saw it under her name. And the statement said, if you think education is expensive, try ignorance. And I saw a lot of people were texting, but if the minister was a professional, she would have acknowledged that that is Burnham's statement. Years ago, when he was asked if Guyana can afford free education, he said, if you think education expensive, try ignorance. And this now goes up as if it is some idea from the People's Progressive Party or from the minister. In academic terms, it's plagiarism. That is what it is. It is open
Academic crime.
plagiarism. I could understand you don't want to acknowledge Burnham and his intellect, etc. But then somebody said, an author that I cannot remember, but to put it over as if you formulated this idea and now saying to people, if you think education expensive, try ignorance. And that should be understood, because ignorance is a terrible thing. If at a certain level you know the difference between a preposition and a noun, then, or a pronoun, then we're in trouble. But the point here is that professionalism will dictate that it be acknowledged. But I want to go on to another point. In dealing with COVID and the schools, there is a critical issue that not one minister is commenting on. The question of COVID, school, and law enforcement. Have they engaged the Guyana Police Force? Have they prepared special policemen and women to deal with the transgressions that will occur once you reopen school? Let me give you an example. A man comes, or he or she, and they don't want to abide by the protocol, say, washing their hand, doing what? How do you deal with that? Are you going to bring policemen who are not trained to deal with that? And then you get police brutality in the school system? There is need for a proper interagency body that involves health, education, law enforcement. I even believe the fire service should be involved, because you have to deal with these issues in a comprehensive way. And you can't wait until it happens. We have already had a case of somebody aligned to the PPP going in a school and assault a teacher. You know, we have seen people in the PPP bite a policeman and nothing happens. And they declare, you know who is me? Yes, there's God. So I'm saying to you, there are issues that are going to emerge. And with the PPP activists, the pomposity, how do you deal with it when they're want to go into the school, believing that by virtue of the fact that they are PPP, they have the right to do what they like? What are the measures you're going to put in place for those to be dealt with? Just opening your mouth and say, opening school September is easy to see. Opening it properly with the aim of protecting our children, the parents, and the teachers is another matter altogether. And so the only call I can make here is for, I wouldn't even call for the involvement of the opposition, but let professional interagency people deal with these issues. Because in the final analysis, it's our children that will be affected. I don't know how many of the present ministers got children in the public school. But children in private and public school, we would need to have proper arrangements in place. You know, this government has a way, when they were in government the first time, they clean the drains they want to clean and left the others. But when the flood come, flood know how to know if drain black near got up. And so many areas that they had drained for political reasons also were flooded. Because if your neighbor flood on the water, ain't got no way to go after the car, he ain't got no drain. They can go over by you. And so we need to change this approach and take an approach that really establishes that we care. For them, because we care is a slogan. It's like when they had accountability and transparency. While they are saying that, they know they are lying because they don't like accountability. They have no idea what is transparency, and their closest affiliation is to corruption. So we have got to recognize that the PPP also is a sloganeering party. We can 50,000 cash grant. They bring them down to 19. Increase wages and salaries for workers, that disappeared. Reduce cost of living gone up. All of those were slogans by the PPP. they specialize in slogans. They started when they came to power in 1992 to be lean, mean, and clean. And then they changed the scene to corrupt and thieving. But the negative slogans they don't want. They want the positive slogans, even though they don't reflect the reality. And so basically, the ministry, the government needs to go back to the drawing board and come with clear plans to ensure children can access education and to ensure whenever schools are reopened, they are the conditions that will protect children. To just say a opening school
Right?
is an issue all by itself. And so, unless also there are proper mechanisms for law enforcement in the context of schools, there will be problems. And so, my simple position is this job seemed to be a little more than the Minister of Education, the Minister of Health. Put together a properly qualified interagency team and let good sense prevail. Because the way we go in, if we mix up, if we mix up a pronoun and a preposition in children's life, the, the, the result of it not going to be somebody say, no, it's not a preposition, it's a pronoun. The result of it will be death of our children. And so we cannot allow an approach in which you just declare schools opening, but you put no proper mechanisms in place to deal with it. And I worry if you got problems with pronoun and preposition, how you gonna take on these big issues?
Very well said. I mean, we have 12 minutes to program time, but before I allow yourself and Coretta the opportunity to give your closing remarks, Coretta would have shed some light on the issue of private school students not being afforded this $19,000 cash grant. I would really like to hear what are your views in that regard, given the fact that one, it is taxpayers' money. A lot of parents pay taxes whose children are going to private school, and they won't benefit from this We Care cash grant. What are your views in that? 3
Again,
minutes.
it is a lack of proper thinking through the issues. One of the assumptions that is made is that when you make a decision like that, you operate on the assumption that all children going to private school, parents can afford it. You miss that there are a lot of people who make sacrifices and really can't afford it, but battle to get their children in private school because they know the problems of the public school. So it is not fair to conclude that once you go into a private school, then you don't need it. And then you have the other case where children are going to a public school, let's say QC, in which the parents are well off. They're probably going to school every day with a different vehicle. And they get it. But children in the private school system who might need it don't get it. And this comes also because the program wasn't done after a proper needs analysis. On these issues, you have to do needs analysis to understand the area of need, the target group, and then structure what you're doing to assist the target group. But again, that will demand plenty work. That will demand intellectual work. And going down that road wouldn't open the avenues for the high level of corruption. But when you go down this road of 19,000, whoever will may come, with no mechanisms to account then we will have the problems we have. Until now, I am still to hear that the public school system has this amount of children. Let's assume the public school alone, and therefore the total cost for them is so much. I am still to find out what happened. This is an educational grant. What happens if there's a parent that has a child that isn't going to school? What happens in that case? Is it that the parent could get it, whether the child goes to school or not? Is this grant a grant to improve children's access to education? If that is the case, then we have to have clear criteria on who can access it, because also they could put down the name of 10,000 children ain't going to school anywhere. They're going to find out. I was in a particular community and somebody said to me, this is before COVID, a lot of the children don't go to school. Are you going to give all those children, or are you going to say to the parents, look, we have this grant. If you get the children in school and guarantee us they'll be in school, you collect your grant. It is just an open sepulchre, like me old grandmother would have said. It's an open sepulchre. Come in, do what you like, and go out. And you do not achieve the strategic objectives you set yourself.
Yes.
That is my take. I believe that private schools,
yes,
some amount of assessment, and then we work out what should happen. But I do believe if it is to increase access to children, all children who are in the school system and going to school should access it.
Correct. I'm reading a comment here by one Miss Veronica Parset. She's saying that teachers need their because we care increases salary. In your closing remark,
and I agree. I agree, Jermaine, because
it is evident that the Guyana Teachers Union must play a pivotal role in crafting this approach that the ministry is denying you the opportunity to. What are your closing remarks?
as a matter of fact, Jermaine, on Tuesday last, one of the placards had on it, we need our because we care cash grant too. So teachers have a right, and this is what I said earlier. At which time are you going to cater for teachers? You have ordered them from 2019. When are you going to fulfill those? And the difficult, the sad part of it, Jermaine, is that since you have not cleared 2019 increases, remember the increases for 2019, you now build on that in the new year. So your salary in 2019 comes over in 2020, then you get the increase in 2020, and then that would roll over. So that has not yet been done, and these sums are mounting. But you couldn't find the sum to pay because it's huge. As a matter of fact, teachers are still owed their debunching monies. Teachers are owed monies. Those teachers who are teaching in the special schools, they're owed their monies. They've not been paid. And so it's a whole series of backlog, of financial backlog that we have to clear. So this whole talk with them and because we care, again, is a whole political foolishness. And I think they're in their campaign mode. Because if you look at what is happening, all the ministers are out there, and they're not only going out there to have the parents, they set up booths in the schools and they have the parents come and teachers verify, and the teachers are the parents are collecting the 19,000 grant. They have to hear a long political lecture first.
Yes.
So because we care, you have to be lectured to. And the lecture is about what the coalition didn't do and what the coalition didn't do and what the coalition didn't do. But I want to say in closing, and I would repeat this 1,000 times, that this cash grant, this school's cash grant, it's a waste of finances. And I'm saying this because of this. It cannot be a school's cash grant, and it has to be used to buy food. Schools cash grants got to be used for education, to purchase educational stuff. And so I would have thought that this government again would have gone out there to look for tablets, because we are going to be engaged for a long, long time in virtual classrooms. And so I would have been happy to see the minister going out there and presenting 5, 6, 4 tablets to parents who got 5 and 6 children, so that they are going to have access to education. They're going to have access to their classes when classes resume, rather than giving them $19,000. As a matter of fact, let me say, a parent said to me, Miss, every day is fight, cry. She has 1 bicycle, 3 children. The eldest has the bicycle was bought for the eldest. So the eldest decides how long the 2 smaller ones ride. So every day is crying. She said, Miss, with this cash grant, it's 2 bicycles I go in and buy. So they ain't got no more crying. They ain't got no more fighting. And this is the reality of it. So that was one of the positions that I posited for this cash grant. But I want to zero in and end on this. When the coalition thought of, because we have a plan there, and we talk about an educated nation. And you know what we did for our children? And this saved parents thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars. The leader, the president then initiated the 5B's plan. Books, breakfast, both bicycles. What else we had, Jermaine? I can't remember. Both bicycles, buses, books, breakfast. 5.
Yes.
So all of those children who were coming to school without having anything to eat, when they came to school, there was breakfast for them. There were boats to help the children in the hinterland to get to schools. They had buses to pick up children at different points, pick them up and drop them off. And we didn't have to think about our children have to be crumbled and doubled up in minibuses, and think about these crazy reckless drivers that we have on the road. These were provided for by the coalition, in addition to what else the students and the pupils across this nation were offered. And so that is positive thinking. That is visionary thinking. That is sitting down there and analyzing the hardships that parents across this country go through in order to get their children to school. And that was initiated by the coalition. And I want to advise the Minister of Education that the conduct of meetings is not your responsibility. The conduct of meetings is the administrative head of the ministry. Allow the professionals to do their work, and you oversee what they do. Allow the professionals to carry through with what they have to do in terms of policy, and allow the program to go smoothly, rather than the minister having to be in every single meeting. Every single meeting, if the minister is not there, the meeting can't go on. And this is what is creating some of the problems. But let me close by saying, the Guyana Teachers Union, our business is the welfare of our teachers, first of all, and then our students. We are ready and we are willing to sit at the table, to agree, to disagree, and to agree in order to make this education sector, to make our education sector, and to make our education sector a better one, so that we are not going to have the return of no child left behind. And I'll close on that.
Well said, well said. Very cogent advice. I hope that the minister is listening, and I know she is. She always tune in whenever you're on, Coretta. Mr. Aubrey Norton, your final thoughts, sir. Miss Coretta, before you go, I want to say thanks
My
for
final
being
thoughts are simple.
Anytime.
My final thoughts are simple. There's need for a comprehensive approach that is multi-agency, interagency, so that we can deal with the issues. Note tonight, I ain't even touched sweepers and cleaners. And they also have a stake in this. So I close by saying we hope the government gets good sense and take the approaches that are recommended. Good evening.
Thank you very much. You are on straight up on 107.1 Bench Cup Radio. Let me take this opportunity to thank all our fans on Straight Up who tune in tonight. Thanks to our guests, Miss Coretta McDonald, Mr. Aubrey Norton. Thank you very much for gracing us with your presence and allowing us to engage in a very timely and meaningful conversation. Our viewers are definitely educated tonight. So thank you very much, Mr. McDonald and Mr. Aubrey Norton. Straight up
You're
family,
welcome. Thank you.
good night.
Good night to you, viewers.
She put a pot on she hair and gone. Them a the first one out on the dam. Basket on she head, bucket in each hand. Hold up on she frock, I wanna she grandson. To the market, them a go. For the morning, the day is dawning. For cockacrow to give the villagers a warning. Rise and shine, the birds them a sing. All animal take turn as them join in the waking. Cockacrow, dagabag, donkey, bray, horse, and they even duck a quack. Cockacrow, dagabag, donkey, bray, horse, and they even duck a quack. Come and hear this sweet story that tell the people about life in the country. All day a back down, me now a come home. The naga jackass yard for fetch the load. Cockle shy hand, bag over shoulder, running by his side, a Rexy and Rover. From the farm, them a come. Sun a go down but up the river. Some washing clothes, some folks are bathing at the water. Fisherman, they catch them a bring. From a canoe boat, man, them start offloading. Aymara, Kwakwari, Hail Baka Kuma Kuma, even Lokunani.
It's hard, it's hard, it's hard to be at peace with the ones who are so discard. It's hard, it's hard, it's hard. Them have a knife in your back and them smile it so broad. Help me to deal with the ones them who said them love me when them really don't. Help me to deal with the fans them kill me flesh when the crowd a shout. Jesus, help me on the battlefield. Jesus, help me on the battlefield. Help me on the battlefield. Cause the booby traps with them set is real. I never want to take your glory, Lord. Send your angels to encamp around about me and stand guard. To envy is so easy and to love it is so hard. Let me work for your glory and not for the award. Don't make me ever get caught up in the scream and the applause. And go talk about the blessing and not talk about the Lord. All these things are vanity. I need your reward. Let me be real. Don't put on no facade. Help me to deal with the ones them who said them love me when them really don't. Help me to deal with the fans them kill me flesh when the crowd a shout. Jesus, help me on the battlefield. Jesus, help me on the battlefield. Help me on the battlefield. Cause the booby traps with them set is real. Sticks and stones can break my bones and words can harm me. They can harm me. When the evil come against me, you'll protect me. You'll protect me. Father, I need the strength of your son. Cause you know my work is not done. Lord, I need that endurance just to finish this race that I run. Cause the booby traps with them set is real. You tell me if you stand firm, cause every little plan you have a confirm. I know them evil plan turn. In a darkness me a the lantern. So help me to deal with the ones that who said them love me when them really don't. Jesus help me to deal with the fans them kill me flesh when the crowd a shout. Help me on the battlefield. Jesus help me on the battlefield. Help me on the battlefield. Cause the booby traps with them set is real. Help me to deal with the ones them who said them love me when them really don't. Help me to deal with the fans them kill me flesh when the crowd a shout. Jesus help me on the battlefield. Jesus help me on the battlefield. Help me on the battlefield. Cause the booby traps with them set is